Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Cheney. I'm at the Joint Staff J7, and we want to welcome everybody this morning to this signature event. I work within the Deputy Director of Joint Training and Exercises, and today's panel is going to be on integrating technology to transform warfighter training. As we increase training across the department, we are constantly faced with a more complex and global security environment. Technology is changing rapidly, and for us, we have to be ready for that change. How do we prepare our forces at the joint and combined force level for this new near-peer threat as technology evolves at such a pace that really has to make us rethink how we approach training. Today I'm joined by some exceptional leaders that really bring diverse perspectives to this and also are able to provide their perspectives and their perspective AORs that they work in. So with that, throughout this panel, we're going to have questions and answers. So I want the military, we have two military members that will be walking through the aisles. I really welcome you guys to bring questions to the panel members, and we're going to make some time for that at the end. So I first want to introduce our panel members. So first we have Brigadier General Goodman from Indo-PACOM. Brigadier General Goodman serves currently at the J7 within Indo-PACOM. He is a prior U.S. Air Force Academy graduate with command and pilot experience of over 4,100 flight hours, 850 combat hours. He brings an incredible perspective from the Indo-PACOM region that it really is one of the most complex areas that our joint and coalition forces are operating in today. The next member is Brigadier Damien Hill. General Hill is an Army Australian officer. He comes from is the director of the Joint Collective Training Branch within the J7, within the Australian headquarters of Joint Operational Command. He has led many efforts to modernize training in the Australian Joint Forces, emphasizing interoperability with our allies and partners. His insights into global integration and the role of technology in joint training are really critical to today's discussions, because us, as we certainly know, it takes all of our allies and partners to be prepared into the future. Cool. The last panel member is Colonel Tim Roosted within Joint Staff J7. He's a Joint Technology and Simulation Division Chief. In this area, he leads modeling and simulation, providing a simulation for the combat command and service exercises. He has a wealth of experience in integrating live, virtual, and constructive simulation environments for our joint forces. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into the first question. So this is really for all of the panel members to set the stage. So what is the current state of your warfighting training programs in your respective areas and commands, especially as we have emerging technologies such as autonomous systems, counter-UAS, AI, everybody wants some of that AI stuff, and really what is your approach as you bring that into your training and exercise? And I'll start with you, General Goodman.
Well, thank you, Mike. But first, let me say thank you to ITSEC, to the sponsors for this event. I'm a longtime beneficiary, first-time attendee, but I have been benefiting from the rigor and the intellect and the energy that you've been pouring into the training systems for many, many years. But it's great to be here on behalf of the Indo-PACOM from the Joint Staff, the Indo-PACOM J7 seat. We use a lot of these tools. You ask about the state of war fighter training. I would characterize it as good and getting better, never complacent and moving forward. And probably it's good and getting better, not probably, it certainly is, because of the efforts, again, and energy and innovation by members that are a part of ITSEC and in this room today. It's good and getting better because it is both true and necessary. I probably don't have to remind you that our adversary capabilities are advancing rapidly, hand over fist, in all domains, so air, space, EW, long-range precision fire, surface, subsurface, AI, et cetera. And so are blue capabilities advancing rapidly, and all of you know all of that. And so we therefore have to evolve our training capabilities and our programs, which is really why we're here today. If I were to characterize INDOPACOM from a training perspective, I would say it is increasingly joint, it is increasingly connected, and I'll talk more about that, and it's increasingly combined with the partners. And you'll probably hear me foot stomp some partner like talking points, if you will, that may be less emphasized in other portions of this, but it's really important to INDOPACOM for those considerations. A couple of capabilities I would highlight from the INDOPACOM quiver is first our Pacific Warfighting Center that really hones in on the modeling and simulation, the wargaming, and the technical backbone support to all the exercises that occur at INDOPACOM, as well as PIMTech, which is the Pacific Multi-Domain Training and Experimentation Capability, PIMTech. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But those two portions of the INDOPACOM J7 come together to address your exact question. Weave in those capabilities as rapidly as can, plug into industry, and then provide that capability forward into the theater. So I'll come back to painting a picture of the theater a little bit more, which is to say there are young men and women who are in the first island chain that depend on these capabilities that you're developing and providing for their training, for the exercises, demonstrations, and rehearsals that are occurring, and they matter to the security of the Indo-Pacific. One way in which they're doing that in particular is merging the live events and the JLBC. It's the L. We focus from an operational readiness on the L a lot, the capabilities forward, the young men and women, the joint forces forward, and then weaving that into the rest of the VC and certainly the J. So now we're taking live events, whereas before there would be really important business that's happening in the field in our FTXs, really important business that's happening at the C2 layer in our CPX, and we're weaving those together in a way that creates a better rehearsal, a better trained force, a better partner trained force, which ultimately results in increased capability, increased operational dominance, which is the theme of this ITSEC, which ultimately leads to increased deterrence, which is our number one duty at INDOPACOM. So here's my final thought for the introduction, is that you heard it said, you train like you fight. I don't think that's true. I think you fight like you train. In our keynote, we heard that you rise or fall to the level of your training, and I think that that's true. So that is what we are attempting to provide as forward as possible, as rapid as possible into the theater of consequence at the moment.
No, that was great.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, General Hill?
Yeah, thank you. Probably first and foremost, from a partner and an ally, I spend my team every week with INDOPACOM J7, and almost every month, and increasingly every week, with Joint Staff J7. INDOPACOM is our partner COCOM from an Australian perspective, so the relationship is tight. The human and procedural kind of interoperability are really important. The human to human, you cannot replace that. Talking to each other, having relationships with allies and partners, despite the weird English that we speak from time to time, is really important. The procedures are increasingly important because our technologies will not always seamlessly connect, but our TTPs and SOPs become the important fusion when our technologies don't. And funny enough, our potential threats will target our technology. It's really hard to target our processes. So that's really important. And the work we do together alongside every other nation that I certainly, and if I look at Talisman Sabre, we had 19 nations, including the United States and Australia. They're all very important for us to understand how they operate. To answer your question though, Mike, I have three ways I think about the implementation of modernisation. You have to experiment always. If you are training like you did yesterday, you're going to fight like you did yesterday, you're going to lose very quickly. And so inculcating experimentation into your exercises and your training is a must. Doesn't matter what TRL you are at, if a technology can be seen, you can touch it, and you can actually train your people to employ it, you should use it wherever possible. Now, I'd like to think that was an Australianism, but I got taught that by the Marine Corps as a major. So, because that's what they do. They were always trying to keep themselves ahead. I learnt that, and I've taken that with me through my time as a commanding officer, my time commanding the Combat Training Centre, and indeed my time as the J7. So to give you an example, Talisman Sabre, 43,000 participants I think we had. There were a lot of standard training integration activities. We had over I think about 80 experiments underway, spread across the entire exercise AOR at all different levels, some close to delivering, so it became their operational T&E, others were preview T&E, really formative part of the TRL, but it's our opportunity to get our people touching those things and providing intimate feedback to our S&T community, to industry. So use those marquee exercises because our people will teach us things about systems that we have no idea about. And so it's really valuable. The second is you must force all domains to train all the time. We will naturally fall back into our individual domain. You must force the domains to come together. So the rule in the Joint Operations Command, indeed in the J7, there will not be a training or an exercise that does not have every domain represented every single time. We are too small in the Australian Defence Force to just operate as a single domain. We are much more powerful. We describe it as our aiming mark is to be an integrated force. Integrated means it's like an acorn. The acorn turns into a tree. A joint force is glued together. That means there are weaknesses in the seam. So our focus is to train as a joint force to become integrated because it's very hard. I joined the Army and then became a member of the Australian Defence Force. Where part of that inculcation is changing that. Join the Australian Defence Force, serve in the Army, joint always. Integrated is the aim. The third part is, and it's a bit like what you said, Face, you have to fight your threat, not yourself. So you've got to understand the potential threats, and some of those aren't humans and capabilities. Sometimes it's the environment and the geography. And so you have to be able to train against the threats all of the time. That takes some trust from government, particularly in our case, to take the ability for us to do different things with and the like. And so exercising and training with a threat force that will challenge us is incredibly important, and they need to think like our potential adversaries will think, because it's no use fighting blue versus blue. I know how we fight, so it's pretty easy to find out our weaknesses. I want them to fight like a potential adversary to test where our seams are in that joint force.
Thank you.
All right. First of all, I just want to extend a regards from Brigadier General David Everly. He's our Deputy Director for Joint Training and Exercises. He couldn't be here this week, so he asked me as the M&S lead for the Joint Staff and our reps for OSW to be on the panel today. And you know, looking out in the audience, I got some counterparts that I served with in the 32nd AAMDC with General retired Chuck Anderson and General retired Guy Jones at MCTP, and it just brings me back to where I was as a lieutenant or a major lieutenant colonel, and trying to kind of describe what modeling simulation can do for training, right? And in the air defense community where I grew up, it was really easy. It's very similar to the Air Force when you're doing training in an air simulator, right? We were able to get after training and understand at a battalion collective level to do that level of training in a virtual environment. As you fleet up and you're trying to teach those corps and the divisions and the MCTP world that we had, we started to have that rub on introductions of technology on the battlefield that we couldn't emulate, right? And it was frustrating because it was also a a policy decision, because if it wasn't part of your table of equipment, you're not able to train with it. So as we talk about experiments that you mentioned, sir, I couldn't agree with you more. We need to find those vignettes that we can splice off as we do a constructive training for global integration training, like we're trying to do with multi-combatant command exercises, yet split that off and have that realistic, first night type of fight influence how that exercise portrays going forward. So I think from our perspective, the difficulty that we're seeing across the joint force is that those tools are already in the hands of the warfighter right now, and they want to be able to utilize them and know what the effects are at the combatant command level. It's difficult in a constructive event to be able to chase that. And what we find is, especially with all of the commands going out and doing different investments in artificial intelligence to enhance their planning capability and have con-op decisions in stride during an exercise, we are chasing that, and instead we try to keep, when I say we, the culture across the training and the joint force is meant to, right now, still tethered to training objectives. And those are important. We need to be able to still be able to report our readiness through combatant command exercises and lower. However, we need to be able to step outside of that and do those experiments with the technology that's already in the hands of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians. So that is our largest challenge, I would say. The other piece that we fight right now is interoperability across real-world systems is difficult in itself. Yet people want to wash that away when we do modeling simulation training and expect that networks and modeling simulation can be compatible and interoperable from the start. We can break some of that, I think, and I think some of the acquisition reform that is going on should help with that. I'm really excited about the Army's efforts in the next gen constructive capability that will be initially embedded and integrated directly into JLVC, and they will not have an additional federation, if you will. And when that occurs, that allows all the services to have their authoritative collective training models within the Joint Live Virtual Constructive Federation, and it will absolutely help with our partners and allies.
No, thank you for that, Tim. So I'm going to pull the string a little bit on some of what you said as I go back to General Goodman. So you certainly talked about a lot of challenges and I also think there's a lot of opportunities with emerging technology. Me as a technologist, I don't think there's a more exciting time than where we're in with where we're seeing technology and how quickly it's advancing. We certainly have challenges in training within cyber domains, electromagnetic spectrum domains. We also know, or I know General Goodman, the tyranny of distance in Indo-PACOM and just training across the AAOR is very challenging. So what I would ask you is, we're sitting here at an M&S conference, how can M&S and how can the industry help you in understanding how can we leverage modeling and simulation better to train effectively the warfighters that need it?
Well, it's very easy, Mike. You mentioned, sorry, the challenges and opportunities. I believe that the challenges are, in fact, the opportunities. Admiral Paparo says that problems are the things that leaders run to. I think operational leaders, industry leaders. And so when you list them off, go, all right, that's where, I'm not going to call it kids soccer, but that's the problem we need to be rushing to, and I think we are from the conversations that I'm having. Admiral Paparo talks about some meta trends and a mega trend in the operational environment. These are probably not exclusive. These are things that I hear in the headquarters, and they are going to make sense to all of you. They are the ubiquity of unmanned systems in all domains. It is the availability, and cheap at that, of long-range precision fires that's changing the shape of the battlefield. And then last is the primacy, or at least the suffusion of information operations into the cognitive domain. And then the mega trend is going to be the competition for network access and assurance for that connectivity across the warfighting functions. And so our job and the challenges are to replicate the modern battlefield in our training and exercises, in our capabilities. So we're certainly looking at Ukraine, the Middle East, modern conflicts, the modern battlefield, take those lessons, overlay them onto the unique geography and conditions in the Indo-Pacific, and that is what we're incorporating and training to. Again, fortunately, I have some strong teammates in the Pacific Warfighting Center and PIMTech who are also running to those types of issues, incorporating as fast as we can through events exactly like ITSEC to upload those capabilities. The JLVC modernization from the Joint Staff is going to be of great import. I consider that, especially in terms of the multi-level security aspects, the ability to stitch together multi-domains from a U.S. or really U.S. and partner capability up and down from unclassified, secret, top secret SCI into the program space. Have those effects applied in training, in exercises, and then have it diffused so that it's just not in some upper room staring at a white card, knowing what really might have happened, but having a realistic outplay in the exercise scenario. I think if there is a challenge that I would identify, it would be complacency and in the culture, and this has been identified in a couple of venues as well. Complacency in forward movement, good enough, is not okay, and then a culture of quit in areas where you may think that we're late to need or ceding the ground to the adversary. There's no place for the culture of quit or complacency from Admiral Paparo all the way down through Indo-PACOM. So there's a couple of ways that we see some of those modern technologies being played out in exercises.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Colonel Roosted, I know one of the things that you just talked about is the multi-combatant command exercise piece of it. Certainly being part of the Joint Staff, I can have an appreciation for, as you're stitching together multiple combatant command exercises, what are the opportunities and challenges that you're seeing with emerging technologies and being able to do that?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, and thank you, sir, for mentioning the JLVC modernization project that we're undergoing. So big effort there. You know, we spent the first, I'd say, 12 to 18 months focusing on really internally at the JLVC and trying to get the data standards and guts of JLVC ready to do some of the exquisite capability that we need to do in a constructive environment. So getting after non-kinetic effects across the Joint Staff so we can limit the amount of white cards that are played, bringing in space capabilities, the fully informed simulation environment that you alluded to, allowing us to eventually tie together all the way from top secret down to secret REL exercises so that if an effect can be felt all the way down to a releasable level. Those are some of the challenges that we have when we start doing the global integration events like these multi-combatant command exercises. Last year, I think we tied together 7 combatant commands for an event like that. This next year, it's all 11 combatant commands and partners and allies, along with some of our government partners as well. So with that, the biggest challenge that comes with it is releasability. And that's why that fully informed simulation environment can't come fast enough. Luckily, before we even got policy decisions that were going to push us down for exercise design to that fully informed simulation environment, we had leaned forward in the JLVC modernization project to start laying the framework where we can have that capability. It probably won't be resident across the globe for a couple years, but we're starting small and establishing a top secret training network, which will allow us to at least get after some of that exquisite capability in these bigger exercises. One of the things that we find is that scope and scale, those effects are usually done by individual teams, but they have strategic impacts in that and ripples in the exercise or in the real world. And how do we get after that, right? And what we've focused on in improving the JLVC Federation supported events is our measure of success is going to be how we turn on additional training audiences, the JADers themselves, so that when it comes to an exercise, it's not just, oh, this week this exercise is going on, it's gonna be my part-time job. We don't want it to be their part-time job. We want to be able to immerse them in that exercise and get the A team. Because I've been there 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where sometimes it almost seemed like we brought on the guard or the reserve to do our exercises, right? And now we can't afford that. We are actually on the, we need the A team to be playing, but they don't want to play if it's not going to be real. And that's what we owe them. And so as we bring in these individual capabilities, they might be exquisite and only so many people are going to utilize them. But those are the difference makers on the battlefield today.
No, thank you for that, Tim. That was great. The next area I really want to go to is over to Brigadier General Hill, is we certainly see the importance of coalition in training in all of our portfolios and in our training programs. The question I really have to you is, how do you see that we can increase that partnership in a way that it's going to strengthen our global strength, and also really ensure that those shared adversaries that we're ready for, especially I go back to the Indo-PACOM region, you have this tyranny of distance where contested logistics, cyber, you have space now that are such a key player. And we know that each country brings different capabilities with it. And at the same time, emerging technologies are moving at a huge rate where not all countries are moving at the same pace too. So how can we leverage M&S to do that better?
Yeah, so the real challenge goes back to shareability. So we're a member of the JLVC fraternity, so we have access to that, which means we can connect, and we do. It is seamless connection with our US. We don't have that same level of capacity. There is no NATO in Indo-PACOM. They tried that, it failed. Every piece of terrain in Indo-Pacific is part of a sovereign country that have their own sovereign requirements. So how do we bring them into our environment to enable us to train together more fulsomely, so that we don't make the mistakes when we have to do it for real? And for real could be HADAR activity, it could be whatever it is. We make mistakes real early on that we could have fixed if we'd trained together, and M&S is a really powerful way to solve some of those interoperability issues, those language barriers, because some of the tools we have can translate much better than I can. And so using that opportunity, so what are the applications, federations and others that we can share with the Indo-Pacific to boost them up, while still protecting the relationships we have bilaterally and other ways. And so having different applications there that provide a similar effect, but enable the likes of, our nearest neighbours are, Papua New Guinea, which we've just signed a treaty with, Indonesia, which is an enormous archipelagic country. We've got Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei. We've got a lot of countries in our region that have very powerful sovereign national focus, but want to train, want to exercise with us, because Australia used to rely on the geography, that tyranny of distance.
Oh, yeah.
Geography is immutable, but our relationship to it changes. Our relationship to geography, based on the current capabilities out there, has changed a lot since 1942. A lot. And we recognise that. So we must work much more closely with our neighbours in the region than, frankly, we have in the past. I see modelling and simulation as an entry point into that relationship.
No, that was great. So, General Goodman, I'll go really over to you on that as a little bit of a follow-up. I know through your PIMTech effort, you know, allies and partners was a huge part of being able to move that thing forward. Can you speak to kind of the allies and partners and the PIMTech effort and how that was really one of the initiatives that Indo-PACOM used to start driving some of that?
Yeah. PIMTech is critically important to the Indo-PACOM training mission and to Indo-PACOM. I'll just paint a quick picture on how important the allies and partners piece is to Indo-PACOM. It goes without saying, but from an exercising perspective, there are somewhere around about 23 joint exercises. About 4 years ago, there were 14. In every joint exercise, if it was unilateral, it's bilateral. If it was bilateral, it's multilateral. If it was multilateral, now it's multilateral. And so, to General Hill's point, the partners are in, and they're in it to participate, grow, professionalize. This is not just a kind of a bog satter get together when we get together. And so the knee and the curve in the training capabilities of our partner nations. And I could run a list, but it's significant. There is positive traction and momentum building into the areas that we most need them to be building. And PIMTech is part of that. As described, PIMTech, it's only about 4 years old. Dr. Stridiron, about three and a half. I round up. It's funded through Indo-PACOM through Pacific Deterrence Initiative. It goes into places where services and partners either won't or can't, and that's okay because of priorities and resources, to be the cohesive building blocks into joint and combined interoperability. So its objective, I'll just read it: enhance, enable joint coalition interoperability across Indo-PACOM. Some examples of those capabilities applied are in distributed networks, C2 nodes, battle management, facilities upgrades, training range capabilities. We have forward presence, US has forward presence, 60% of the globe, all of those facts that we talk about, Indo-PACOM and the responsibility. Well, what we don't have are training ranges and capabilities. 75% of the ranges that we operate on are coalition owned and operated and sovereign, and that's good. But what we can't do is rotate those forces back to Nellis or to Utah or to White Sands, et cetera. And so PIMTech is taking those capabilities forward through some of those examples that I described, stitching together that JLVC, starting and building around the L, remember, with our focus on operational capability, fight tonight, realism, and then just building around that with all of those really important capabilities. And so JLVC is a huge part of what PIMTech provides. It's, as described, it's good and getting better. Valiant Shield 24 was great. Valiant Shield 26, I heard in a podcast about 2 weeks ago, is going to be the largest JLVC event, on the planet in history. So that was exciting for me to hear on a podcast about my exercise, but I think it's true. And so, and many of you may be a part of that, right? We build that experimentation capability, and we build the live virtual constructive. We are maximizing the operator training even while we exercise and demonstrate that capability, which all leads into deterrence. So I'm very, very proud of what PIMTech is doing. It's leading to higher levels of readiness. I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about PIMTech, Dr. Andre Stridiron, the lead of PIMTech is talking tomorrow in a joint all-domain panel tomorrow. But I'm happy to discuss further or point you in his direction or to that panel, but incredibly important.
Yeah, no, I know all the work that you guys have done on PIMTech, and watching that needle move over the last few years is just incredible of what it's done for training. So that's great. I'm going to go back over to Tim Rusted, Colonel Rusted, for this one. And it's really a discussion that really, I'd say in the last few months within the Joint Staff that we've started getting more demand for, and that's how do we build a more adaptive training cycle? For folks in the audience that most may know, but many times exercises is a 12 to 18 months planning process. So by the time that you get into those final phases, things have changed. The environment has changed. And I think that we're seeing and hearing from leadership is, that we have to shorten that because we're getting lessons learned that are coming out of the field. There's lessons learned happening in those AORs, and they're not necessarily making it into those exercises. And it comes back to the lessons learned side and global learning as a whole. So, Colonel Rusted, can you speak to kind of where you see the training cycle and where it needs to move to, and any efforts that you see that are going to be ongoing to try to change that and how the impact is on modeling and simulation in that vein?
Yeah, I think through the lens of the Joint Staff J7, Joint Force Directorate, and the three kind of lines of effort, time epics that the J7 falls under, with force employment being that 0 to 2 window, force development being the 2 to 7 window, and then force design, the 5 to 25. What we're seeing is that force development window of the 2 to 7 is shrinking and meeting up right with the force employment window. So what we have to do is be able to bring this in a rapid way. And so the J7 has also the mission of joint education and also joint doctrine. So one of the new initiatives that is being started over the next couple weeks, just kind of teased it out last week or so, but is a global learning initiative from the Joint Staff. General Lazewski, who is currently serving as the director of the Joint Staff, but moving into the J7 role next week, has asked us to take a hard look at how we can roll, lessons being learned out in the force, PME, AARs, doctrine, real world in-stride activities that are going on across Russia, Ukraine, China, wherever you might find those lessons, and quickly roll that in. So we, from a technology standpoint, feel like, again, we've postured ourselves pretty well for this. We have been playing, if you will. We were a first adopter of AI for the Joint Staff ahead of the CDAO. Supported through Mike. Actually, Mike Cheney over here is the technical lead for the J7. So he quickly understood that we couldn't stand still in the Joint Staff as we saw AI being developed. So about three and a half years ago, we looked at abilities of scale AI that we had seen 18th Airborne Corps working with, and said, hey, we need to bring this in. What we didn't know was, we didn't know how we were going to employ it, and we didn't know how it was going to be useful. Well, it's been useful across the entire joint force, and that's just one of our AI investments. And we get questions sometimes like, why are we investing in multiple AI capabilities? Well, some of it is because we don't know what company is going to work out, right? But some of it also is we are investing in some of our own technologies, our own government-owned AI capabilities so that we can kind of manage it ourselves and play around with that in that space, right? So we plan on leveraging probably multiple AI capabilities to influence this cycle of learning. So if you imagine, I don't know how many people have accounts for the Joint Lessons Learned Information System, GILIS, but it is pretty much mandated across the combatant commands and the services to put in your lessons learned into there, right? But we also have other databases for experiments. JexNet is another one out there. So if you're doing combatant command level experiments, service level experiments, you're supposed to put in your data into that thing. There's another one called JDICE. There's others, all these disparate systems. Well, what we plan on doing is trying to use the data lake approach, if you will, and put all of those lessons learned, other information coming in from the environment, and then as that comes in real time, we influence the design of exercises through the joint training tool. Our own joint training tool that supports multiple exercises, not just combatant commands, but services rely on it as well, provides the fabric for your storylines, your themes, your master scenario event lists that drive the timeline of your exercise. But as I was talking about before, a lot of people like to keep that on plan. They want to get by training objective to training objective, make sure everybody gets trained in your event. Well, in this construct, we would be able to influence in real time from, you talked about the JELC shrinking. Mm-hmm. Well, in the concept development conference, you might have these objectives tied to these environmental observations. But by the FPC, we want to be able to have that in real time be influenced and changed, and it doesn't, you can do that in stride with your exercise control. And on the back end, on the learning piece, is at the end of that event, provide our joint knowledge online capability to create an AI-informed training capability so that we have some courses that go out to the joint force on here were the lessons learned, here's how you can get smarter on this, and so we can turn that in real time. And within, we anticipate within a month, you could have a package of classes that have been distributed and it's ready for another combat event. Now on the JELC cycle itself, we are also being challenged to shorten that. Likely to more of a 3 to 6 month window. I think we are also postured to do that. I sat in the PWC for a measles development conference last April, and there was 400 people at the PWC. And I talked to a couple of your folks at the event, and they're like, this is unsustainable. We cannot continue to do this. Well, JTT is meant to be joint training tool is meant to be a distributive tool. So we need to get it better. We understand that. We've had some struggles coming out of the gate, but we should be able to have AI-enabled threads in there, and it should be at a 95% solution, and you don't have to bring 400 people together.
No, thanks for that, Tim. You know, it's interesting because we talk about the AI pieces and how much it's influenced things to work. And I think the one thing I'll add to one of the things you said was having industry help us understand where to employ AI within workflows and processes that we have is an area that I think that us as the government has a really hard time understanding how to define and talk to those requirements as well as we would like to. And I think that's where we look to industry and coming out to things like that. And for General Goodman, I think the thing that I see is Indo-PACOM has been trying to accelerate things for a very long time. And your training programs, I think, are no different. You know, many times, I think one of the first times I went out there, you know, they talked about how they look at training as just an operation and how that shortens and drives some expectations. So can you speak a little bit to kind of how you see accelerating and adapting that training?
Yeah. It's a bit of an operational take, a little bit away from the M&S for a moment, yep. In that this is maybe doctrinal heresy. But training and exercises is one way in which INDOPACOM campaigns and achieves its theater objectives with our partners, with our joint forces forward. And so everything that you described is exactly how we think about it, which means that if we are in the middle of a Talisman Sabre and there is a need for forces to turn left instead of right, then we figure out how to do that and to accomplish those operational objectives. Okay, that's just a bit of the theater objective, stepping away from the specifics of the topic. Tim, you hit on some really important points, one of which is the lessons learned aspect, the data lake across the functions. Like, how many of us have participated in exercise and then said, thank God that's over, and then you write an ESR, an AR, and then you're moving forward. And now we have that ability to reach back in, collate, and create some real executable objectives and learning as we go forward. That has been an objective for a very long time, across the force. In my previous command was 57th Wing, and we were trying to figure out how to do exactly that, how not to accomplish, an individual red flag, 3 times a year, each one a brand new experience, right? So there's a difference between individual learning, which is good, Blue 4, and collective training for the force. A rising tide rises all boats, but we need to accelerate that given the threat that we talked about earlier. So your point was well taken. We're certainly looking at how to enhance the training environments at INDOPACOM, and that is closely in relationship with the Joint Staff J7 as well, leveraging things that you hit on a bit, whether that is AI tools for high-con information environment, OP4 partner engagement like Green Force that is playing. So we could enhance kind of the environment that we're playing in. But I'll just get real tactical for a little bit and describe how we're thinking about it in terms of some attributes that would be helpful as we design whatever kit shows up into exercise control. And again, really tactical at the J7 exercise level. One observation is that certainly the world is changing, adversary is changing. You know who's changing is our training audience. Blue Force is running fast. And if our exercise mechanisms are not keeping pace with 11th Airborne or whatever the training audience is, then we are not providing that qualitative training experience for the training audience. So the first thing is speed. So an attribute that we're looking for in exercise mechanisms is speed. Integration is certainly a piece. We've hit on this as well. Cross-domain fusion, seamlessly provided to exercise control to the ECG. AI, well, that's not an attribute, it's a thing, I got it, but it's a lot of things all at once. But enabling all of those functions that kind of alluded to before, it's really going to reduce the manual operation, enhance the speed, enhance the integration that we've already talked about. Interoperability, this is, again, with great help from the Joint Staff, is solutions that connect across simulation. This is the Federation of Systems, a common plug or interface based on common data standards. You guys get all of that. And finally, it's scalable. It's one thing to do it something really, really cool on the floor. It's another thing to do a multi-combat command, or global or a theater-wide exercise. And so those are some of the key attributes that we're looking for as I look to improve the game in exercise control, which provides the training audience, again, who is running absolutely at light speed. It's worth noting, again, coming back to partners, that as we look to catch up and run fast, consider our partners' capability. And really, I talked about learning from Australia. That is 100% true. That's not who I'm necessarily talking about in this case, but there are many partners in the Indo-Pacific who are very interested and willing and should be considered by all of you in this space as well, so that we are at pace with each other running forward. So bottom line, those are some ways that we're thinking about accelerating training, at least from the exercise provision perspective.
Oh, that's great. It definitely is something that we're hearing about from a lot of different areas. How do we accelerate? How do we accelerate? I think I know the technologists hear it a lot. Go faster, go faster, go faster. But it's really because of the mission that we need to get done in the training side. So I'm going to go to kind of our last kind of structured question, and then we'll go to the audience questions. So the last question, I'll kind of throw it over to Brigadier General Hill first. And really what I want to ask is, we have a increased complexity of global threats, certainly. You spoke a little bit about interoperability and the importance of interoperability. As I go down on the floor today, we know we have hundreds, maybe thousands of simulation capabilities in NMNS. And we've got to be able to make that all work together to ultimately achieve one thing, and that's our strategic readiness of a joint and coalition force. So can you speak to kind of what that challenges is that you run into, and how we overcome it on the interoperability side?
Yeah, so a little bit on what Face talked about. I'll talk about procedures. So we've literally came to the same affinity almost at the same time. Who's training our trainers? Who's training us to deliver the exercise life cycle and the training design and the delivery? If you think about it, I remember when I was taught exercise design, I now go back and look at those courses and they're filled with other things, really important things. But teaching our people training design and then exercise formulation is gone. And I guarantee you it's probably the same in the US in certain pockets. So both Face and I literally this year have piloted what I've called an exercise or collective training staff course. Yours is an exercise planning course. It's elevating our people because we can't expect them to come into our organisations ready to go. That then enables us to be more efficient. The fact that we're sharing our information is providing procedural. That means when I turn up to an Indo-PACOM planning conference, we're speaking the same language of exercise and training design. That makes us more efficient. When it comes to the modelling and simulation or instrumentation, the first thing I ask a company every single time is, can you operate on the classified environment? If they say yes, I tell them to prove it, because I've been told yes many times and then it's been proven that's not the case. If you can't operate on our classified environments, then you need to be able to work hard to do it. It's not on me to do that. I'm the demanding customer. You need to demonstrate that to us, because if you can't, I can't work with our allies and partners straight away. So that's really important. And are our systems, and the classic is live instrumentation. We all buy our own different miles gear, and I was talking to Dale Whittaker before. We've all got our own pieces of kit that are important that we've made sovereign decisions around. The key is, when we come together, can we share that data, that instrumentation data, and then can we collate that data and put it into a constructive simulation to provide the visualisation for our commanders so they can make decisions. I'd like to think the last part's actually pretty easy. It's the hardest part to do, because you're then feeding it into joint data networks to stimulate C2 systems. There's all those data standards that you talked about, Face and the like. So asking the right questions is really important when you're making decisions on acquisition, and always having that thinking back as to, who will I use this with in the future? And that's fundamentally important to me. So right trained people, systems that speak to each other, or at least you know that they can operate on your environments, are fundamentally important. For us, AI, machine learning, I'm a kind of a machine learning person. I'm still not convinced that AI is the thing until my brain is artificially and not what it is, which is fairly lowbrow. Machine learning, or those tools, for me, are an opportunity from an exercise design perspective to make us more efficient. I've got so much data on decades of experiments and exercises sitting on our databases. I want to draw on that, because some things are the same. Safety, control functions, communications, they're all requirements that I need. Environmental protection. I want to use what I've done 10 times in the past, apply machine learning to generate those products that I need to undertake safe exercises. The same would be for M&S tools, I'd imagine, as well, because I want to focus my time on the things that are new. If I'm spending 80% of my time on the things I do every time, I'm not committing the right amount of time and effort to the next generation of capability.
No, thank you. Colonel Roosted, do you kind of want to give your perspective on interoperability? I'm sure with the JLVC and many of the things that you have to stitch together from the services, you have a pretty interesting perspective on this.
Yeah, I think what we've experienced over the last 2 years with the development of an initial capability document. And I know it's a tough word when we talk about the JSIDs, acquisition reform. JSID's kind of going in a different direction. However, this capstone initial capabilities document that my team rolled out about a year ago still has large implications for the joint force, right? It loosely, it's a broad document that is meant to be a living document that highlights 5 critical requirements that if you want to be a model or a simulation that is going to be leveraged across the greater joint training synthetic environment, that you should comply with these type of standards. And when I say it's a living document, it's a living document based off of these standards do change over time, right? Data initiatives come out, new data standards come out. But we wanted to make sure that services understood that you needed to have this broad, or a company, industry, or a government system, that you knew what these were, right? So we talked about a common data standard, whatever that current common data standard is for the JLVC Federation, that gets spelled out every year through the Federation Integration Guide. You're going to have to comply with that if you want to be part of this larger federation, right? Stimulation. What we find a lot is the second requirement, you have to be able to stimulate real-world C2 systems, right? And what we find is a lot of model and simulation is cool, but there's no connection to that stimulation connection to a C2 or a C4I ISR network that is going to be leveraged by the warfighter. Training in and of itself is good if you're in a UCOFT or a flight simulator, but if you're trying to get after real training that senior leaders are going to have to make decisions on, you have to reach the real world C4I systems. And we're challenged with that right now when it comes to the classification side of the house. So if we need to follow some policy decisions and we are going to rehearse some capabilities, we might have to bring our simulations up and stimulation up to the C4I systems up to the highest classification levels. Well, we're not there yet right now, so we have to make some hard decisions on, do we have to create a new training environment that is specific to a TSSCI or higher level, or do we have to go back to scenario-based training? So some of those are hard decisions, but another one is you have to follow joint integrating framework, right? So whatever that framework is, and when we talk about the joint training synthetic environment, it's a environment of environments. So you have things like the persistent cyber training environment, or the joint simulation environment that the Air Force and Space Force and others are starting to pile in on. Those should be able to be interoperable with the JLVC so that we can do those split off scenarios and do high-end 5th gen type activity and have it be informed in our exercises. And then the multi-level security, as you mentioned, sir, I mean, that is a go-to right away. If you're not able to go to at least secret, then in today's training environment, that's going to be hard with the Department of Defense or Department of War. And then data reuse. We talked about this in the beginning or a couple questions ago with the learning. We have to be able to use that data throughout the life cycle of of the events, and then continue to have those that data be informing events of the future. So, and the last thing with this question, you know, one of the biggest challenges we have is service executive agent roles, right? So in the information space, we don't necessarily have a service that has a model that is the authoritative model for information, right? And then also, EW is a similar challenge. So there's a few areas that we rely on industry to fill those gaps right now, because the department hasn't necessarily pinned the rose on a service to be the lead to create that for a collective training environment. And that's what the joint staff relies on, is the services and the combat support agencies like MDA or DTRA and others to provide their authoritative M&S collective systems into our federation. Without getting that executive agent, we are stuck having to find a solution, fill it with our own models, and then wait for someone in another service to come up with something better that we can have them support us with. So those are some of the interoperability challenges that we see.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tim. It is challenges, I think, especially like you said, in those domains where there's not an executive agent. It constantly challenges that. So, General Goodman, and from what's your perspective on interoperability from your AOR?
Yeah, what I hear, well, I will, without echoing, concur with everything that has been said. What I hear over and over at Indo-PACOM in terms of major challenges in operations and execution is information sharing and, domain awareness, all domain awareness, and then links back into information sharing. So it's critical in operations, therefore it's got to be baked into exercises. And oh, by the way, once we do it in exercises, that bleeds back into operations and capability that now we can employ. Some of those are policy challenges, and that is some real hard SIX work that is going on. And some of those are technical challenges. And from my seat, I'm seeing progress in both of those. And the result of that is now collaborative planning tools, things like REL COPS that are coming online through those technical solutions. You know, without naming specific or companies, if you will, those types of solutions unlock that capability. An example of what Indo-PACOM is doing, if you're familiar, very 6-lane, but it unlocks operations and exercises, is the Indo-PACOM Mission Network, excuse me, that operates on the mission partner environment, and now we take the tools and plug them into the MPE via IMN, and now we are up and running, collaborating. You name your tool, it's operating with certain partners, and it is unlocking the power of collaboration, whether it's language, individual planning, REL COPS, as we described, that now we are executing a fairly high fidelity exercise, and just to the point of stimulating the C2, that enables now the trainers, the ex-con, to be seeing the same environment that the training audience is seeing as well. And that's a slight departure from where we have been in the past, where the stimulations and simulations and tickles would go in, and then we'd show up overnight and adjudicate and figure out what happened, and the masses would show up. Now we're watching and understanding that same picture. And so that is the value of what is happening in the information space, and then applied that domain awareness, which is more of an operational necessity, if you will. Yeah, so in design, or in summary, we're designing that bilateral, multilateral data layer that unlocks all of that capability. So we're gonna see it in Keen Sword coming up. It's already, you name an exercise, and we're applying those tools to those two concerns I just described.
Yeah, that was great. So now we're going to go ahead and move to a couple of the audience questions. We have about 25 minutes left, so I'll get to as many as I can. I'm going to start with Brigadier General Hill on this one, and I'll probably ask you, General Goodman, for a response on this one too. You talked about the importance of training across the board through this. Brigadier General Hill, you discussed the importance of integration of experimentation as well. I also know INDOPACOM really looks at using experimentation. But how are you guys capturing the outcomes of training, beyond those single exercises? So there's true learning as we go forward. And I know that comes back to our in the Joint Staff, the global learning piece that we're looking for. So Brigadier Hill, how are you guys doing that?
Yeah, so firstly, I have some limited edition Tal Saber coins. So for those who ask questions, you get one. Mm-hmm. So, and that's on behalf of General Goodman. I paid the bills, but we're sharing the... Yes. It's a good question. The way I would describe it is, so from an Australian perspective, similar to INDOPACOM and I'm sure other COCOMs, every exercise that I run is tied to the theatre campaign plan. Mm-hmm. So we have a theatre campaign plan as well. It is, unfortunately, given we have a single COCOM, it is a global theatre campaign plan. But there isn't an activity or exercise I do that isn't related specifically to a line of effort within the theatre campaign plan. Tied to that, each of our exercises are designed to test where some of our opportunities exist, or indeed where we have some deficiencies in capability, and we have a priority list similar to what INDOPACOM and others generate, that we focus our energy on trying to provide, through experimentation, the types of capabilities that might fill that gap that has occurred. So that's kind of what we do. We have to build the models. The great thing about simulation is you can take a single model that might be a submarine and turn it into something like a ghost shark, which is a UUV, by changing its behaviours. I can't do that physically. I can't turn Virginia class into a ghost shark. It just doesn't happen that way, but I can in sim, and I can. So I can actually apply a whole bunch of techniques to the simulation about how we might employ uncrewed underwater vehicles such as the Australian Anduril, Ghost Shark, and then test that through live experimentation, which is what we did on Tal Saber. So we've been exercising with the capability through our CPXs by trying to work out how we'd employ it, from slave ships to operating remotely to which types, and then we've applied it realistically, including payloads on our FTXs, because you can't. Sim only takes you so far. You've actually got to use the system as well, and you find gaps in what you've developed from the TTPs. So I've found that's really important when it comes to experimentation. Ideally, I would have a concept or an idea that has been written by a service about how they will do something. I would connect technology to it. I would train a force in both of that, and that force, the way I like to run it, I used to do this at CTC, is I make them the opposing force. Because the irony is the opposing force, for some unknown reason in our exercises, seems to be more innovative, because they're unshackled from what they think is the doctrine, whilst the blue force, because they're getting tested and don't want to fail, will usually stick to their lanes. And if you've done an NTC or a JRTC or even a JPMRC, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because I used to do that to my forces in CTC. So I give that op for. If you do that, you actually get that richness. And that's kind of how that experimentation works as well. There are others that are just technical experiments. They're equally important, because it's about burning through those technical readiness levels to get it to a point where it becomes, in the US parlance, a program of record, or in our case, a project.
Yeah, thank you. General Goodman?
Yeah. I agree with everything that you said. I like what you're doing. A couple of additions in how I would think about capturing lessons learned across the JEPs and the SEPs. There's a lot of ways to think about it. There's at the theater level that you described, and we do think about that assessment piece, and we leverage AI to understand things like the information environment, both friendly and adversary information on the reverb, if you will. So that is an application in addition to the collections of the ESRs so they don't go into an old dusty 3-ring binder, and then back and recycle not just one, but all of them into future exercise design. I would offer that even the headquarters, so there's a very Indo-PACOM perspective, is at the direction of the commander, AI enabled, and we're becoming increasingly more so through training of the staff. We're learning from UCOM, NORTHCOM, CDAO, and others to incorporate AI, machine learning, question mark, into just our daily lives. Examples, both in exercise, we Indo-PACOM, record everything. It is every meeting, every O&I, every commander's update brief, every decision brief, and then those are essentially compiled and they produce the Joint Operations Directive in minutes. Right, so these are the things that many of you are already incorporating into your business or industry life. And so I would just offer that in addition to the capturing the headquarters, administration and battle rhythms, all of the planning tools that are available to the headquarters that are agentic in nature, that run the iteration tens of thousands of times, that offer solutions and insights that we might have had, deviations from the current, from a COA dev. So you're not offering 3 COAs, you're offering 30,000 COAs, of which the instances of success occur clustered around A, B, or C. So the COA development, COA decision, and all of that. I know I've deviated slightly, but these are different ways that we're incorporating technology, not only into assessing the effectiveness, but in exercises, and this was the point, and then we export them into our daily lives now. So we thought, thank goodness that exercise is over. We could stop with all that, technology business and return to old information tools. Now,
we in all the exercise we do with Indo-PACOM, we do the pre-planning meeting before the traditional JELC starts. The first question we always talk to each other about is what did we do well last time that we want to sustain, and what did we do poorly that we need to fix because our commanders are going to focus their energy on it. And it's been a really powerful way of reminding ourselves the next exercise has to solve the last exercise's problems.
Very good.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. I mean, we're certainly seeing, I know at the Joint Staff, a longer look at how are we assessing the campaigns of exercises and training. And I think that's really what the driver is I think we're starting to see that they recognize there's a huge opportunity for driving things across the force if we're looking at along longer time horizons. So the next question, there's only one pilot on stage, so I'm going to throw this one at the pilot on stage, which can you speak to kind of the importance of the joint synthetic environment as a priority for training? And I'm going to add something to that. In the long-term, probably, ability of having joint synthetic environment into the larger architecture of training.
Yeah, happy to. And this will all reach back into a previous experience, previous assignments, but well-grounded. Can I story tell just a little bit?
Absolutely.
Can I use my hands? No. As described, the training and exercises that are captured, especially in a red flag type of environment, the culmination of air combat from a U.S. Air Force perspective, and it includes partners for sure. You would top. That was it. And when you'd hear old chiefs of staff talk, they were trained well so that when they found themselves in combat, it was easier in Desert Storm, OIF, because they experienced it first, the chaos, the mayhem at Red Flag. That is no longer sufficient. You have probably heard these threads throughout for numbers of reasons, whether they're wartime reserve modes and capabilities, whether it is the ranges and distances, the capabilities of both friendly and adversary weapon systems. We just can't do the things that are going to be necessary on night 1 and night 100 in the open air training environments. We can do a lot. For instance, we've stitched together the entirety of the Southwest United States, but it's hard, you transit, altitude. It's a little artificial, but you could do some really neat things, but you can't do it all. And an observation that came out of the United States Weapons School, which culminated every 5.5 months with an exercise, formerly mission evaluation, now weapons school integration, was kind of the highest end air combat with 6.5 months or 5.5 months of professionals at the top of their game with those instructors. This is like the Maverick level. They're good. Well, you would expend a day planning, a day executing, a day debriefing, hundreds of, the cost was immense, the jet fuel was immense, the time, the airspace, and maybe your buff fell out, or whatever it was, and you lose the opportunity, you miss the training, and if you're lucky, you take part in 2, maybe 3 of those events in your course. Turn into a JSE-like environment that the weapons school was able to leverage from a provider. And that same level of integration occurred 6 to 8 times a day for 5 days straight. So somewhere between 32 and 40 massive joint high-end capability being applied to the toughest problem on the planet. And then you could just start to go to work. You're like, if instead my EA isn't out here, but instead it's here, if I put the Aegis here instead of here, if I embed the strikers here instead of here, let's run it back. And you're able to learn, so not only train, but learn rapidly and accomplish what used to take the jet fuel, the time, the airspace, the resources in a much a larger commitment in a much more condensed time. Now, that's expensive, that's hard, but that's the importance of where we are going to a degree and where we need to go in the JSE environments going forward, my perspective.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. The next question I have, I'm going to ask Colonel Roosted, because this is a great question for him. What do you see needing to be done or that is being done to look at how we govern M&S to help drive integration? And the challenge that we certainly see is there's multiple environments. There's joint synthetic environment. There's an environment for your cyber. There's environments for EW. But getting that into a more single architecture, do you feel that there needs to be some type of governing body that can help drive that change in a positive direction?
I think it would be useful. And I know it's been tried before through the Defense Modeling Simulation Office. I think what bogged that down a little bit from what used to be DoD, R&E's, DMISCO was there's just too many communities across modeling simulation, and that there isn't a training centric office that is focused on that, right? So, I think there's 450 or so Army functional area 57s that are modeling simulation officers. Many of them are in the training realm. However, when you talk about governance within the Army modeling and simulation, they're mostly focused on experiments and academia, that realm on the policy side. They don't have as much influence on the training side, and that falls over to Leavenworth, right? So what's funny about that is that it's all disjointed, and that's just an example of the Army situation, right? But it gets elevated at the OSW realm, where people don't even know the difference between what mission simulations is for mission engineering versus what it's for experimentation, what it's for wargaming type activities, or specifically for training. So I do think that it's probably about the right time, as I know OSW is looking at potentially a government accountability office report to kind of like look at what training resources are being invested in across the services. Are they efficient? Are they aligned to multi-domain operations training? And this might come out to the point where they have to identify some type of government structure where they're like, okay, this is more directive in nature on how we align some of these activities. So it would hopefully answer a lot of the interoperability and integration comments that have been made, right? With the acquisition reform and the JROC changes, there wasn't a ton of teeth from the joint perspective to be able to enforce service standards. But in their defense, there also wasn't a lead agency saying that this is how this must look for the joint force to be designed. Instead, we have a coalition of the willing, if you will, where we are reliant on the service models, and we are reliant on the service models to be doing their domains at the highest level at the in a collective environment. So that all being said, I think it is time that we probably have a little bit more authoritative body that is directing some of this. We have an ICD, but that's, again, the JSID system is in flux right now. So I think we need it. It would help training across the board, and it would potentially align efficiencies across the different services and make us more joint in nature.
Yeah. No, thanks, Tim. So the next question I'm going to throw over to General Hill, because I know they certainly do a lot in the cyber area, and this is an interesting question. So, do you see a day where many times today we have very closed networks when we're talking about doing cyber operations and cyber training? Do you see a day in the future when we're going to start allowing and taking a little bit more risk in our cyber areas to be able to train more real time with cyber effects in training? And I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, cyber's, from a training and modelling and simulation perspective, cyber's one of the most difficult domains. We've signed up to the persistent cyber training environment. We've had it for a couple of years now. It's a fantastic environment for individual training for cyber, for our cyber capability. But you can't model cyber in sim the way you can model the other domains. It's just not physical. The space is challenging, but it's easier. At least you can see satellites. The real challenging part is how do you apply that in a multi-combatant command CPX without handing post-it notes to them to say your computer screen's gone blue. So it's really difficult. So that means that when we're operating our normal systems that do interact in the environment, if they are under some form of denied or indeed a cyber offensive activity against them, they may not know the difference between the machine turning on. I'll give you an example. We tried a couple of years ago in a CPX to apply cyber somewhere differently. So what we did was we started degrading some of our systems, our day-to-day systems, different levels where I was given permission to do that. And we noticed they didn't notice any difference. They were just ringing the ICT help desk. And so eventually they started realising what was going on, and then we started interfering with some of the security systems. So the swipe card access and the like was playing up. Why is that? Because the things that will have cyber interference may not necessarily be the things we think we are, which means we need to understand where our weaknesses are, whether it's in some of our engagement with industry. Logistics, for example, is a constant challenge given that. But what tends to happen then is the bollards in our broke down on one of our exit points into one of our headquarters, and they blamed me for that. I didn't do that, it just broke down. So it's really difficult to start building in the DNA of what cyber does and what it can do by bringing in external actors into it, so that getting OSI and others, that open source intelligence and the like is really, really challenging. That's where I think machine learning, AI can help, because you can actually use it to build an environment that is as close to realistic as possible. You can't do that manually. I've got, we call them trolls. They're my cyber threat actors who develop all the information operations and a bunch of other stuff. I simply don't have enough of them to do what, I can't stimulate our systems sufficiently enough. I will offer that with our CPXs, our command post exercises now, I treat them as series. They're not, the CPX is the culminating event of a series of activities, both blue and white, which includes significant amounts of cyber activity. So we will adjudicate cyber threats, both defensive and offensive, throughout the cycle, so that when you get to the start of the culminating CPX, they've already been experiencing cyber. I've not been able to find another way of doing it. It's actually really challenging. If you've got some way of solving it, please let us know, because it's a really challenging environment to collectively train our people.
No, that was great. Yeah, cyber's been a challenge for the 10, 15 years that I've been in cyber as a cyber person. So I'm gonna get about 2 minutes, I think, for General Goodman to answer this question, but we're gonna end with this question. The question is really talking about, I think, fight like we train, I think, is what you talked about. Is, when the balloon goes up, there's concerns that, the way that we're conducting training using model and simulation, because of the classification restrictions and the way that we're looking at classification, may be, not the way that we're necessarily going to fight. The classification issues sometimes break away when we're truly in the fight with trying to get information across various platforms and things. So can you speak to whether or not you're concerned with the classification and the way that we rise lots of things to very high levels, and then at the end, when we're fight, we might change that approach?
I feel like you wrote that question, Mike.
No, it was not.
The Joint Staff J7. No, I'm concerned. That's exactly what we're trying to get after. However, I think that there's, if you look at as recently as Ukraine, you understand operational necessity, but more importantly, you understand the need to precede that with capabilities, and which is what we're trying to do right now. Through those, the tools that allow collaborative planning, RELCOPS, the IMN, like I said, we build in training what we can flip potentially for an operational purpose. And so we design that way. So we don't design only for training use to be discarded should we find our need to use it in reality. So things like the networks that PIMTech is melding forward, the C2 facilities that we are building that support exercises, they may have a multifunctional use should they be necessary. So there's always in our mind the operational reality that we find ourselves in PACOM. So that's the way we think, that's the way we're building, that's the way IMN and the mission partner environment should be. Is it big enough yet? No. Is it scaled to where it needs to be? No. But that's the vector that we're on.
No, that's great. And no, it was might have been one of my guys. I don't know. It's fun stuff. So, that really comes to the time, the end of this panel. I just want to thank the audience members for all the questions that were sent in. I think your insightful discussion, because it is a very challenging time, but lots of opportunities with the technology that's coming through. I think we all feel that. I know the technologists and probably a lot of the M&S people that are at this conference this week certainly recognize that there's a lot of work to do, but there's a lot of opportunity ahead of us to really improve training. And really, what do we do here? We train warfighters. That's what we're here to do. That's what all of this M&S is here to do. And it's an important job that we all have. So I'd like to give give just a thanks to everybody for doing this. I know we had a very short time window because of furloughs and shutdowns and things that were happening in the department, so this just gave us an opportunity. I'm glad you guys could make it for this discussion. So if you give the round of applause for the audience members. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're done. Thank you.
Hey, limited edition Towel Saver coins. If you wrote a question down, please come and get it.
Yikes.